Okay, so you want to buy a villa on the Palm Jumeirah. Find a house on one of the fronds, put your money into it, pay no property tax and no income tax, live with your feet in the sand and watch the number on the house go up, while the rest of the world argues about interest rates. You've seen the picture. The white villa at the end of a frond, the infinity pool sitting a few meters above your own private stretch of beach, the Dubai marina skyline stacked up across the water like a wall of glass. A yacht tied up somewhere behind you. 45 minutes on a plane from half the world's population. No capital gains tax, no inheritance tax, no annual property tax bill arriving in the mail. A 10-year residency visa attached to the deed, sunset every night on the same side of the house. That's the picture. That's what the listing photos are selling, and honestly, the listing photos are not lying about the view. Here's the strange part. Almost nobody who owns one of these villas is making money the way you'd think. The house is not the asset. The rent is not the return. And a large share of the people who did make life-changing money on the Palm never held a villa for more than about 18 months. Let's start with what you think you're buying. You think you're buying a house. What you're actually buying, in most transactions on the Palm, is a piece of manufactured land with a depreciating building sitting on it. The Palm Jumeirah is reclaimed. Nakheel, the state-linked developer, dredged sand off the seabed and sprayed it into the shape of a palm tree starting in 2001. The fronds were finished around 2006, and the first villa handovers landed in 2006 and 2007. That means the original villa stock on the fronds, the garden homes, and the signature villas is now approaching 20 years old. 20 years old in a marine environment in a climate that runs above 40 degrees for 4 months a year. That matters more than it sounds. A 20-year-old house in a temperate climate is a young house. A 20-year-old house sitting 200 meters from open salt water in the Gulf is a house that has been under continuous chemical attack since the day it was handed over. Salt air does not care about your architect. It gets into the air conditioning coils, the pool pumps, the automatic gates, the balcony railings, the outdoor lighting, the fixings, holding the pergola up, the reinforcing steel inside the concrete. Every metal thing outside your walls is on a clock, and the clock runs about 3 times faster than the one you're used to. So when you buy a frond villa today, you are frequently buying a teardown wearing the price tag of a home. Walk the fronds and count the skips and the scaffolding. A meaningful share of Palm Villa sales in the last few years have ended with the buyer gutting the property to the shell, and a good number have ended with the buyer demolishing it entirely and starting again. The price you paid was for the plot, the beach frontage, and the direction the plot faces. The house was a rounding error that came with the land, and in some cases it was worse than a rounding error because you have to pay to remove it. Here's where it gets interesting, because the direction the plot faces is not a small detail on the Palm. It's most of the price. The fronds run off the trunk in 2 directions. One side of a frond looks back toward the Dubai marina skyline and gets the sunset. The other side looks at the Atlantis, or at the back of the next frond, or at a stretch of water with nothing on the far side of it. 2 villas built by the same developer in the same year, identical square footage, identical layout, one flipped in the mirror. Can trade many millions of dirhams apart because one of them has the skyline and the evening light and the other one has the morning sun hitting the pool deck at the exact hours nobody is outside. You are not buying square meters. You are buying an angle. And you're buying an angle with a neighbor problem attached. The fronds sit close together. From your beach, the villas on the frond opposite are not a distant view. They are a specific house with specific people in it, close enough to see what they're doing on their terrace. The private beach is private in the legal sense. It is not private in the sense that anyone would use the word. Now, the actual cost of getting in. Let's say you buy a mid-market frond villa, not the record-breaking signature villa that made the newspapers, just a solid renovated garden home, and let's say it's 26 million dirhams, roughly $7 million. That is your headline number, and the headline number is where most buyers stop calculating. On top of it, the Dubai Land Department takes 4% of the purchase price to transfer the title. On 26 million, that's 1,040,000 dirhams. In theory, that fee is shared between buyer and seller. In practice, on this island, in this market, the buyer pays all of it every time. Then there's the registration and trustee office fees, then brokerage, generally 2%, which is another 520,000 dirhams, plus 5% VAT charged on top of the commission itself, because the commission is a service, and services are taxed even where the property is not. If you're financing, add more. UAE banks lend generously to residents and much less generously to non-residents, and above a certain purchase price, the loan-to-value ratio tightens regardless of who you are. A non-resident buyer at this price point should plan on putting down half the purchase price in cash, sometimes more, and should expect the bank to want its own valuation, its own life insurance policy on you, and a mortgage registration fee calculated as 0.25% of the loan. Add it up. Before you own a single teaspoon, you are roughly 1.5 to 1.75 million dirhams into transaction costs on a 26 million dirham house. Call it 6% gone on the day you sign. Remember that number because it comes back later and it comes back with a friend. And then there's the renovation, which is not optional as often as buyers hope. A full strip and rebuild of a frond villa is a serious construction project. You are looking at 7 figures in dirhams for a light refresh and multiple millions for a proper gut job. And the timeline is not 3 months. On the Palm, you are not just dealing with a contractor. You are dealing with a master developer's design rules, the building regulator that governs these communities, approvals for anything that changes the footprint or the elevation, marine works permissions if you touch the seawall or the beach, and neighbors who are entitled to object. A full villa rebuild on a frond, from purchase to move-in, routinely takes 12 to 18 months, and during every one of those months, you own an expensive object that produces nothing. But here's the thing, nobody explains to you before the wire transfer clears. Dubai has no property tax, and Dubai property still bills you every month like it does. Let's do the other side of the ledger properly, because this is where the fantasy quietly dies. Start with the community charge. Every villa on the Palm pays a master community fee to cover the shared infrastructure, the roads on the frond, the landscaping on the trunk, the security gates, the seawall, the beach cleaning, the drainage. It's assessed on the size of your plot, and on a large frond plot, it is a 6-figure annual number in dirhams. It arrives whether the house is full, empty, under renovation, or listed for sale. Then district cooling, and this one deserves its own paragraph because it catches almost everyone. Large parts of the Palm are served by centralized district cooling rather than by air conditioning units you own. Your bill has 2 components. One is consumption, which is what you actually used. The other is a capacity charge, which is billed against the connected cooling tonnage assigned to your villa, and which you pay whether you are in the house or not. Leave the villa empty for the entire summer while you're in London, and you will still be paying tens of thousands of dirhams for cooling capacity you didn't consume because you didn't buy cooling. You bought the right to be cooled, and that right has a rental price. Then electricity and water. A 6,000 or 7,000 square foot villa on an island in the Gulf in July, with the pool at swimming temperature and the whole envelope fighting a 45-degree exterior, is an enormous energy consumer. Your garden is a further problem. Every liter of water on that grass came out of a desalination plant, was pumped down the trunk and out along your frond, and is being sprayed onto a lawn in a desert that is actively trying to kill it. The garden that looks so effortless in the photograph is one of the most expensive square meters on the property, and on that same utility bill, quietly, sits the housing fee. 5% of the annual rental value of your home, collected in monthly installments through your electricity account. Dubai does not call this a property tax. It is not legally a property tax. It is 5% of what your house would rent for, charged to you every year forever by the municipality, and it is collected so smoothly that most owners never think of it as a tax at all. That is the most elegant piece of fiscal engineering on the island. Now add the people. A villa this size runs on staff, housekeeping, a gardener, pool maintenance, and someone who deals with the 11 things that break. Add servicing contracts for the air conditioning, the pool plant, the water features, the generator, if you have one, the smart home system that was state-of-the-art in 2007 and now cannot be repaired because the company that made it no longer exists. Add repainting the exterior far more often than you'd expect because sun and salt strip finishes off a west-facing wall. And then there's the part of the property you never look at, which is everything below the ground floor. Your villa is not standing on bedrock. It's standing on sand that was dredged off the seabed and sprayed into position roughly 20 years ago, and reclaimed ground continues to settle and compact for a long time after the last truck leaves. The water table under a frond is seawater, and it sits close enough to your garden that anything buried is living in a mildly corrosive bath. Pool shells, below-grade plant rooms, irrigation lines, drainage runs, the steel inside the ground beams, none of it is visible, none of it appears in a listing, and all of it ages on the marine clock rather than the calendar one. That produces a category of expense most buyers have never budgeted for, the periodic structural item. A pool that needs its shell reworked rather than its tiles replaced, a basement or plant room that has decided to admit water. Drainage that has to be dug out of a landscaped garden you paid to install. These are not annual costs, and that's exactly why they're dangerous, because a cost that arrives once every 7 years in a lump of several 100,000 dirhams never makes it into the spreadsheet the buyer builds before the purchase. It arrives as a surprise, always at the wrong time, and always on a property that is currently producing no income. Then there's the edge of your own land. Beach profiles on an artificial peninsula move. Sand builds up in some stretches and scours away in others, and the beach in the photograph is a maintained condition rather than a permanent one. Anything you want to do at the waterline, a jetty, a mooring, a rebuilt seawall is marine work in a master-planned community, which means permissions, engineering sign-off, and a timeline measured in seasons. Put a conservative ledger together for a 26 million dirham frond villa, and you land somewhere between 600,000 and 900,000 dirhams a year to simply hold the thing in the condition that justified the price. Between roughly $170,000 and $250,000 annually before a single dirham of mortgage interest. That is the true carrying cost of the picture in the listing. So the obvious answer is to rent it out. This is where the second trap opens. You have two routes, the long lease or the holiday home. Take the long lease first. Your 26 million dirham villa might rent for something in the range of 800,000 to 1,200,000 dirhams a year, depending on the frond, the finish, and the year. That sounds enormous until you divide. On 26 million, 1 million dirhams of rent is under 4% gross. Take the community charge, the cooling capacity charge, the maintenance reserve, and the management fee out of it, and you are somewhere around 2% net on a good year, with a good tenant with no vacancy, 2% net, on a market where financing costs sit meaningfully above that, which means that the moment you use a mortgage, the property does not merely fail to pay for itself, it charges you a fee every month for the privilege of owning it. Positive yield real estate pays you to wait. This pays you to leave. The holiday home route looks better on paper and is a business rather than an investment. Short-term letting in Dubai is legal, licensed, and regulated. And you need a holiday home permit from the tourism authority. The property has to be registered and inspected. There's a per-night tourism fee to collect and remit, and you either run it yourself, which is a full-time job, or you hand it to a management company that takes 20 to 30% of gross revenue for doing the job properly. Then you meet the calendar. Dubai's high season is roughly October through April. Its dead season is roughly June through September, when the temperature makes an outdoor villa with a private beach the least appealing product on the island, and the exact months when your cooling and electricity costs peak. So, the business you've bought earns most of its money in 6 months and pays most of its costs in the other 6. Nightly rates on a good front villa in February are spectacular. Nightly rates in August exist mostly to keep the cleaners employed. And you are not the only person who noticed. Every serious operator in Dubai has been buying and leasing inventory to feed the holiday home machine, which means the nightly rate is set by a professional market with better distribution, better photography, better pricing software, and 100 units to average across. You have one. When the market softens, they discount and survive. You discount and eat the community charge. There's one more thing about the short-term route. The community can push back. Neighbors on a residential front who paid a fortune for quiet do not enjoy a rotating cast of holiday guests arriving at 2 in the morning, and owners' associations and master developers have both the incentive and the tools to restrict short-term letting in villa communities. Your rental model can be legislated out from under you by people who live 40 meters away and never liked it in the first place. So far, the villa sounds like an expensive hobby. Here's the trap almost nobody sees coming, and it's the one that actually determines whether you make money. Because the rent doesn't cover the cost, your entire return has to come from appreciation. Every dirham of profit on that villa has to arrive from a future buyer paying more than you did. That is not a real estate investment in the way most people use the phrase. That is a directional bet on the price of a specific type of asset, funded by a monthly cash outflow, in a market with a very small number of possible buyers. Now put the friction back on top. 4% to get in, 2% plus VT to get out, 6 to 7% round trip in fees alone. Add 3 years of carrying cost that the rent didn't cover, and call it another 6 to 8% of the purchase price consumed. To simply break even on a 3-year hold, that villa has to appreciate somewhere in the region of 12 to 15%, not to make you money, to return you to zero, which means a flat market is not neutral. A flat market on the Palm is a substantial loss delivered slowly, and the losses are invisible because they arrive as bills rather than as a falling price. Owners watch the valuation and feel fine. The valuation is not where the money went. And this brings us to the scarcity question, which is the single most misunderstood thing about this island. Everyone who buys on the Palm is buying scarcity, beachfront in a tax-free city, and the phrase you'll hear from every broker. They're not making any more of it. It's a good line. It's also, specifically and uniquely here, false. They are making more of it. Making more of it is the entire business model of the people who sold it to you. The Palm Jumeirah exists because a developer decided to manufacture coastline. Before 2001, that beachfront was seawater. Dubai's answer to running out of shoreline was not to accept the limit, it was to build shoreline. And once you have proven you can build shoreline profitably, you build more. Palm Jebel Ali was relaunched in 2023 at roughly twice the footprint of Palm Jumeirah, with thousands of villa plots and tens of kilometers of new beachfront. Dubai Islands is adding more. Every year, more waterfront villa product is scheduled to arrive in a city that has demonstrated twice that it can conjure a peninsula out of a dredger and a bond issue. Your scarcity has a construction schedule. Think about what that does to the premium you paid. The thing you bought was uniqueness, and uniqueness here is a line item in someone else's development plan. That does not mean the palm goes to zero. First mover addresses hold status, and an established community with grown trees and a working school run beats a sandpit with a rendering. But the argument that made you comfortable paying $7 million, that there can never be more of this, is the one part of the pitch that the developer's own project pipeline directly contradicts. Now let's talk about how this actually goes wrong, because it has gone wrong before in living memory on this exact island. In 2008, Palm Jumeirah frond villas were trading at prices that felt permanent. Then global credit froze, and Dubai's property market fell somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on the segment, with the speculative high-end falling hardest. In November 2009, Dubai World, the state conglomerate whose subsidiary built the Palm, requested a standstill on billions of dollars of debt, and the shock traveled through global markets in a single afternoon. In December, Abu Dhabi provided $10 billion of support. The tallest building in the world opened a few weeks later under a different name than the one it had been marketed with because the emirate next door had written the check. Here's the part that matters to you as an owner. Prices on the Palm did not simply dip and recover. Frond villas that peaked in 2008 fell hard, then ground sideways and downward for years, then had a partial recovery. Then declined again through the middle of the last decade and did not decisively pass their old nominal peak until the boom that followed 2020. That is well over a decade underwater, on a house that cost you a six-figure sum every single year to keep. The price chart eventually forgave the 2008 buyer. The carrying cost never did. And the mechanism that caused it is still in place, unchanged. The price of your villa is not set by local incomes. Nobody's salary in Dubai supports a 26 million dirham house. It is set entirely by the willingness of foreign capital to relocate itself into this specific city, and that willingness is a function of things decided far outside the UAE. Interest rates in Washington, because the dirham is pegged to the dollar at a fixed rate and imports American monetary policy wholesale. Tax and residency rules in London, Moscow, Mumbai, Beijing, Lagos, and Paris. Sanctions regimes, regional security, the state of the crypto market, which in the last cycle put a genuinely meaningful number of buyers into this island. Whether the wealthy in some large country decide that this year is the year to move money out. Every one of those levers sits in somebody else's building. When several of them move at once, the marginal buyer for a frond villa simply stops existing, and there is no domestic bid underneath to catch the price. In most world cities, when foreign money leaves, local families are still there, still needing houses, still borrowing against local salaries. That flaw is what makes a normal housing market fall 30% instead of 60%. The Palm does not have that flaw. The buyer pool for a 26 million dirham beachfront villa is a few thousand people on Earth, and they all get their news from the same places at the same time, which is also why the market's liquidity is nothing like what the transaction volumes suggest. In a strong year, everything sells. In a weak one, the villa is not a hard asset you can convert to cash. It's a listing, and listings on the Palm in a soft market can sit for a year while you keep paying the cooling charge on a house nobody is cooling. So where is the money actually made here? Because money is very obviously made here. Fortunes have been made on this island, just not, mostly, by the person living in the villa. The first and largest winner is the entity that created the land. Turning seabed into titled freehold plots and selling them is the highest margin transformation in the entire chain, and it happens before a villa exists. Every subsequent owner is trading a product that was minted at a fraction of its first retail price. The second winner is the renovator. Buy the tired 2007 villa nobody wants, spend 18 months and several million dirhams turning it into the white and glass product the current market pays for. Sell into a rising market, repeat. That is a real business with real skill in it, and it is the closest thing to a reliable profit engine on the fronts. Note what it requires: construction expertise, a working relationship with the approvals process, and the ability to carry the cost of an empty house for a year and a half. It is a development business, not an ownership business. The third winner is everyone who charges a percentage. The brokers on both sides of every transaction, the conveyancers, the valuers, the mortgage arrangers, the management companies taking a quarter of your nightly revenue, the maintenance contractors on annual retainers. The island produces a reliable stream of 6% of everything, and that stream flows regardless of whether the villa's price goes up or down. And there is a fourth winner, the one that explains the whole market better than any yield calculation. A large share of the people buying property in Dubai at this level are not buying a return. They are buying residency, a tax position, and a place to put capital that isn't in the jurisdiction they're worried about. Property above a certain threshold comes with a long-term visa. Residency comes with a bank account, a base, and a legal address in a country that taxes personal income at zero. For that buyer, the villa's 2% net yield and its six-figure annual carrying cost are not a failure of the investment. They are the fee for the outcome. The house is a wrapper. Once you see that, the pricing stops being irrational. You are not competing against investors who need the numbers to work. You are competing against people for whom the numbers are the cost of a solution to a completely different problem. And those people can outbid you all day because they're not buying what you're buying. Even then, the passport follows. Zero tax in Dubai does not mean zero tax on you. If you carry a citizenship that taxes worldwide income, or if your home country still considers you tax resident, the rental income and the eventual gain follow you home and get assessed there. And the account holding the proceeds is far more visible to your home tax authority than it would have been 20 years ago. The tax-free island is tax-free at the island's end. Your end is a separate question with its own answer. So put the whole thing together. A 20-year-old house on manufactured land, corroding faster than a house should, that costs 6 to 7% of its value to enter and exit, 6 figures a year to hold, produces a net yield below the cost of money, earns most of its rental income in half the year, depends for its entire return on capital appreciation, and depends for that appreciation on foreign capital flows that no one in Dubai controls, in a segment whose defining feature, scarcity, is being actively manufactured a few kilometers down the coast. And yet, the view is real. The tax position is real. A dirham pegged to the dollar means your asset doesn't quietly melt on the currency the way it would in a dozen other beach markets. The city works, the airport is one of the best connected on the planet, and the demand story for a safe, warm, well-run place to keep wealthy people has not run out. There is a version of this that works extremely well, And the people it works for have three things in common. They paid cash, they bought during fear rather than during enthusiasm, and they intended to hold for a decade rather than a cycle. If you do decide to buy a villa on the Palm, understand what you're actually buying, not a house on the water. You are buying a long, unhedged, dollar-denominated position on other people's decisions to move their money out of their own countries, and you are paying rent on that position every month in cooling charges and community fees and salt-eaten air conditioning coils until someone else wants the angle of that plot more than you did. The beach comes with it. The beach was never the trade.